Just have a look at this photo. There's a group of kids here, and they're having fun at a Beauty and a Geeks party celebration, birthday celebration. The challenges that these kids face every day never make the front pages of the paper. It rarely even makes a conversation, but it's a challenge that they deal with every day of their life. And this challenge affects the life of 12,000 children all across Australia. So what is this challenge? Well, these kids are deaf. But let me ask you, what challenges do you think that they have? Because if I asked this particular group of children, they would say, challenges? What challenges? We're deaf, we're bilingual, and we just get on with it. Now I'm going to show you another photo. This is my parents sitting on the beach when they were young. Mum would kill me if she saw this photo. And these are my grandparents. All four of them are deaf. I come from a family with 28 deaf people. So my grandparents are deaf, my parents, my aunties, my uncles, my cousins. As I grew up, we were involved in lots of sporting events, lots of social events and religious groups. I come from a deaf family, but I'm not deaf, I'm hearing. When my daughter was born, I noticed that she wasn't hearing. And coming from a deaf family, I would have thought that I had a pretty good idea that I might have been right. Duh. Instead, I was greeted with a barrage of professionals who thought that they knew better than me as a first-time mum. They didn't. And from that day on, I've become a very strong advocate for the deaf. I assumed that dealing with professionals, that they would understand the implications and issues around deafness and the deaf culture. And I understand it may be difficult for some professionals to be fully aware of the complexity and the factors around deafness in the culture. And I recognise that they do a great job, and they have a big job, and they have a good heart. But I must say, what came up in our life really surprised me. I knew how important it was to have a hearing test, and based on my family's history and my own assessments of my daughter, I noticed she wasn't responding to sound at 2 days in hospital. So when I told the doctor, he said, oh, she's just a placid baby. You know, we'll normally test her when she goes to community health centres or someone from preschool will pick it up. But I knew that she was, and I wanted to know now so I could communicate with my baby. Undetected hearing loss can have significant effects on language, speech, cognitive, social, and emotional development. The paediatrician tried to test my baby. She was in hospital 2 days old in a little plastic crib, and he tapped the side of it, and she responded. Of course she did. She felt the vibration. So then I picked her up, and I held her, and she was looking at me, and the doctor came and clapped his hands beside her face, and I could see her hair moving, and she responded. Of course she did. She felt the breeze on her cheek, and her hair was moving, and she also saw his hand in the corner of her eye. So I asked to go down to have a proper hearing test, but this wasn't normal back then. So we went down to Brisbane and we found out that my mother's intuition was right and my daughter was profoundly deaf. Now there's a group, this was 16 years ago. Now there was a group back then that lobbied for newborn screening, and this is done in 96% of hospitals around Australia. I commend that change. It's a good result for our kids. When my baby was diagnosed with the profound hearing loss, I didn't have the same emotions and feelings as most parents, going through the shock, the denial, what do I do, searching for answers, getting all these different responses from professionals, biased professionals, the upset. I really knew what I had to do because of all my years of experience, my life experience. But as soon as my baby was born, I had to start fighting. And I had to fight for her right to be able to communicate. When she was 6 weeks old, after 4 weeks of strongly encouraging audiologists to see it my way, they fitted my baby with hearing aids. But if they had it their way, she wouldn't have been aided until she was 8 to 12 months old, and that wasn't uncommon back then. So we would have had to wait till she was 8 to 12 months old and then be aided after that, because it is a bit of a process. It made sense to me to introduce sound as soon as possible. And because she was so young and she hadn't developed the fine motor skills, then she couldn't pull them off, suck on them, throw them away. So we got her hearing aids on, and it was like a little baby. You put a hat on a baby and they take them off. It's a foreign object. So we wanted to start teaching language and introduce sound straight away. The early years were so important. Most deaf children have language delays of 2 to 4 years because they are so lately diagnosed and they're not aided or implanted as soon as possible. Now audiologists encourage the use of technology to babies sooner. That's another great result for our deaf children. Can you believe that there are early intervention programs that encourage parents not to sign with their deaf babies? These auditory verbal programs won't let deaf children be involved if they're bilingual. So if they use sign language, which is a language of the deaf, they're not allowed to be a part of their program, which is teach them speech and listening. And their main focus is on speech and listening. They aren't allowed to lip read. They aren't allowed to use facial expressions. They're not even allowed to use natural gesture. The emphasis is placed purely on the child's amplification system, whether it be hearing aid or cochlear implant. They don't focus on the child as a whole, and they don't focus on language. Here are some statistics. In Australia, 1 child is identified with a hearing loss every day. 2 to 3 babies per 1,000 are born with a significant hearing loss. There are more than 12 children across Australia that have significant hearing losses, and of those children, 97% are born to hearing parents that know nothing about deafness and haven't been involved with deaf people in the culture. 1 in 6 Australians is affected by a hearing loss, and the research shows that deaf children born to deaf parents have much better educational outcomes than deaf children born to hearing parents. And it's purely because the deaf child can communicate with their parents from the very beginning, and they know what obstacles they have to overcome. Now let me introduce you to one of those statistics. This is my daughter, Tiahna.
Hi everyone, how are you? My name's Tiahna. I'm 16. I'm in Year 11 at school this year, and I love school. I work part-time at Woolworths at the register. I also work with some children, teaching them sign language, and I'm always amazed at how quickly they pick up the signs. I like photography, and I love taking photographs of all different sorts of things. And I love music, just like any other teenager.
Can you believe there are deaf children who use sign language and can talk? My mum was told that when I was a baby, if I used sign language, I wouldn't be able to talk. Can you believe people think a cochlear implant or a hearing aid will be a cure of deafness and that will lead a normal life without support? Can you believe that there are deaf children in Australia that aren't allowed to sign? Some of my friends, and I see that they are really struggling.
A cochlear implant or a hearing aid is just the same as a prosthesis. And the dictionary's definition of a prosthesis is it's an artificial device that replaces a missing body part lost through trauma, disease, or congenital conditions.
Imagine a child that woke up the next morning after the operation. They would just get up, walk, run, or skip or hop. Do you really think they could get up like that and walk like that? No, of course not. They would need to do lots of different supportive tools such as walking frames, massages, therapy, exercises, maybe a wheelchair, special shoes, or physio. It takes time, hard work, and dedication, and a good attitude. Even after years, they will never have perfect use of their leg. They might not be able to do something, but find other ways. Not all people are 100% successful. It is not a cure, but it's a tool. When this child goes to bed at night, they take off their artificial leg. But hey, they still have a missing leg. When I go to bed at night, I take off my hearing aid and I am deaf. When I go swimming, I take off my hearing aid and I am deaf. Sometimes the hearing aid or the cochlear implant is faulty and I am still deaf. Can you believe that people expect deaf children to function in a normal way just because we have a hearing aid or a cochlear implant? There are also other tools available to us, like sign language interpreters at school, but often they have no qualification and learning on the job.
Okay, let's do a little experiment. Everyone put your fingers on your ears. Push it in hard, but don't hurt yourself. I'm just going to move this. All right, no cheating, because Tiahna's going to be watching. What does it feel like? Are you trying to read my lips? You're now paying more attention to the interpreter? Are you wondering what you're missing out on? Do you feel really frustrated? How does this affect you, and how would it affect you if it was permanent? Congratulations, you all understood basic sign language. And hopefully it was a little bit of an insight to see what it's like to live in a world where you're deaf. Signing isn't hard. Okay, come on guys, you can do this. Who knows the sign? Let's do it all together. What's a sign for car? Leanne, don't do the sign, just finger spell. And Tiahna, don't tell them. Car. Yeah, everyone's doing that? Yeah, that's car, you're right. Okay, what about baby? Baby, oh, it's so hard. Hang on, what about drink? Oh my God, we have a room full of interpreters, but you can't work with deaf kids unless you get your qualification. Anyway, it's a visual language. It's natural. Can you imagine what it must be like for these kids to sit in a classroom, day in and day out, and try and learn this way? Could you call yourself a doctor after after an 8-week first aid course and no degree and learn on the job doing operations? That's going to affect someone's life? I don't think so, and I wouldn't go to that doctor. So could you be an interpreter and work at a school with deaf children and only have a handful of signs and learn on the job? I don't think so, but it's happening today. This is just one of the problems our deaf children are faced with every day. How does this impact on the deaf children? A lot struggle to get access to a decent education, and therefore they gain poor academic results. Actually, the fact is that deaf children usually leave high school with a reading ability of grade 3.5. There's research to show that. Deaf children can really struggle socially, mentally, they're isolated, and they're always feeling frustrated. Can you believe that audiologists and teachers of the deaf that work with deaf people every single day on a regular basis don't know sign, yet they call themselves a teacher of the deaf? And they wonder why deaf people get frustrated. We believe we could be.
Engaging young deaf minds and empowering their future.
We believe to do this, we must allow the deaf child to access the world around them by using all the tools that are available. Connect with the deaf baby, connect with the deaf child, connect with the deaf adults. Communicate with them in a language that they can access, not based on their assumptions. Don't force deaf people to speak or listen. It's really hard to concentrate on a speaker when there's background noise and the speaker's walking around the room like this, or the teacher, and they can't see their mouths. Lip reading is 70% guesswork, just so that you know. So engage the child so that they understand and they don't miss out. Hearing kids have incidental learning. They hear their siblings, they hear TV, they hear everything. They're learning all the time. Deaf kids miss out because they don't hear that. So we need to bathe that child in a language that they can understand and it's accessible so that they can access the world around them. By engaging their minds, we empower their futures. By empowering their futures, it helps them to be independent. Helps them to have good relationships with their families. Now, we were just talking about relationships with families because dads work all the time. These deaf kids don't have that relationship with their brothers, their sisters. I've had to interpret in a situation for a deaf guy telling his family that all these years his mental health issues were because he didn't have that bond with his siblings and his parents, and he wanted me to tell them that he was dying because he couldn't communicate with them. It was horrible. Better educational outcomes, positive socialisation skills, more connected to the community, communicating on the same level. They'll feel more empowered and have better self-esteem. Less mental health issues. Now, mental health is a huge thing in the deaf community. Understanding their teachers, their bosses, their friends. Better employment opportunities. Think clearly about a topic. And, most importantly, communicate.
I want to say that it's very, very sad.
Oh, blah, blah.
Oh, blah, blah, blah.
Okay, how are you all feeling? Are you going, oh my God, why was that interpreter just going, nah. Well, hang on. That's what happened at the Nelson Mandela's memorial service. The interpreter was not qualified and he was just doing this little thing. The deaf community were outraged. You should have seen Facebook. It was hot. But I kept saying, hang on, that's a great thing, because Nelson Mandela left a legacy after his death, and that was for the deaf community around the world. So fake interpreters are happening. This little experiment shows that the majority of deaf kids, and this is how they must feel, they have fake interpreters every day. There are a small handful that work in education that do amazing jobs, but a very small handful. And there are some that are almost qualified. But honestly, from what I've seen with my own eyes, and I do a lot of work in that area, the majority are unqualified. I wonder if this impacts on that deaf child's education. Not hard to work out. So some tips that we have. Consult with deaf people. They live it. Parents of deaf children need to get balanced views of choices, unbiased opinions from professionals. Stop the divide between signing deaf children and oral deaf children. They're all the same, and let the kids make their choices. Professionals specialising in services for deaf need more training, understanding of deafness, but most importantly need to communicate in sign. All educational personnel that are working with the deaf student should be qualified to work in their positions. Use all the tools available to give that deaf child all the choices. At any time, they can choose what works for them. Sad when you see a deaf child go along to the Deaf Olympics and he's never been able to sign and he felt like an alien with all deaf people. So sad. Meet and learn from deaf people and their experiences.
We aren't that scary.
Help deaf kids realise their full potential. Don't tell them they can't do it or they're going to fail or limit them. So just to wrap it up, it's all about communication, communication, communication. It's the most important tool we need in life to be happy, to be social, to fit into society, to gain a decent education. Deaf children need a language where they can express their thoughts and their feelings. It is so important to the human experience. We all know that. We need to look at the whole child. A deaf child doesn't necessarily need hearing to communicate, but they do need a language. Trying to make them hear or trying to make them speak is not that important. Today, my time is limited to discuss all the challenges that deaf people are facing daily. And I'd much rather be talking about all of our successes and the deaf in the world's successes. But we do have obstacles, and most of the time the obstacles are hearing people and professionals that just don't understand. And that's why deaf call people hearing people. So the fact is they're deaf. Give them all the tools to succeed.
Embrace the culture. Be proud to be deaf. I am.
I just want to leave you with one last quote. She thought you were all going to clap then. But I found this and I just thought I'd add it in. You will look back on therapies, appointments, sleepless nights, tears, triumphs, milestones, equipment, ignorance, struggle, strength, and you'll say with certainty, it was absolutely worth it.